Well, good morning. Have we any visitors this morning? Where from? Philadelphia. Anybody else? We have two from Washington, right there. Anybody else? Okay, well, welcome to all of you, and we hope that you'll be part of our celebration. And today we gather to celebrate a feast day. The church interrupts ordinary time on this day to celebrate a feast that's called the Exaltation of the Holy Cross. Now, the Holy Cross is, of course, referring to the fact that Christ died on the cross for us. In our own church, we are adorned with at least 28 crosses within this room that you can find in various places, on the doors, in the windows, etc. There are also three manifestations of the what is called, in distinction to the cross, what is called the crucifix. There's the processional crucifix, which is here. There is the Station of the Cross, where Jesus is crucified. And in the narthex above the main door, there's a large crucifix. Now, many of you have never seen that, probably because you don't look up. But it's above the door as you come in. In addition, what dominates our church is the large wooden cross way up top. Do you see that? Heavy wooden cross to designate the fact that we, in fact, live under the sacrifice of the cross. Now, let's talk about the cross for a minute. The cross itself predates Christianity as a symbol. It was used in pagan cultures to designate the universe and the movements within the universe. It was used in cultures as far away from India to the Mayans in South America. Used a cross as a symbol long before Christ died on the cross. The cross has a universal pattern. Now, one of the ideas of the cross is that it points in all four directions. And what do we call the gospel? We call the gospel the good news. And what does the word news mean? North, east, west, south. And so the cross helps us to see the universality of our faith and the universality of Christ. Now, some people, and in the tradition that we've grown up in, have a particular affection for the cross with the crucified body on it. But that, in fact, has not been the tradition of the church for the whole time. In the early days, the early Christians, up to the time of Constantine, the cross was not, in fact, did not have a body on it. It was not a crucifix, it was a cross. And why? Well, put yourself into early Christianity. Your God, Jesus, died on the cross, capital punishment. And crucifixion was seen as, first of all, an awful thing, but it was so bad that a Roman citizen couldn't be executed that way. A Roman citizen had to be executed in some other way. Mostly, it was considered... Isn't this funny? It was considered more dignified to have your head cut off. Crucifixion was an awful thing. And so for the early Christians, they did not want to focus on this thing that caused them to be, at least socially, not very well received within the society in which they lived, because only the dregs of society were crucified. So they didn't want Jesus to be portrayed as the dregs of society. And so there was no iconography with the body of Christ on it. Interestingly enough, the earliest cross that is still in existence with a body on it was a piece of graffiti that has been preserved in the plaster of a building in Rome. Someone drew a cross, and they put a body on the cross, and the body had the head of a donkey. And underneath were the words, Alexissimos adores his God. Obviously, it was a matter of a Christian being persecuted and mockery being made of Christ. But that's the earliest one, and you can still see it if you want to go look at it. Piece of graffiti. Because the Christians themselves did not have Christ on the cross, because the theology of the church tells us that we are saved not through the cross alone, but we are saved through the events of salvation, the life, the death, and the resurrection of Christ. That you cannot separate one from the other, that all three must be present. And therefore, the emphasis is not to be on the cross. The emphasis is to be on all three. And so, in the church, we emphasize all three events of salvation. We're not focused on one. We don't focus on the death of Christ. We focus on his life, his death, and his resurrection. His life being what we know about his teaching. His life being the example that he showed. His life being what he taught us about how to live. His death being the fact that he was willing to choose to die for us. And his resurrection, which points us to the direction. There's a conversation going on back there.